Hi, Lou here, sans hat, but with some of my game loft behind me. It's a different background. And I'm going to talk about, quote, sending a game out to die, unquote. Now, this is a common phrase in video games because in video games, as compared to tabletop games, vastly more games are released every year. I'd say 10 times more, but it could be 100 times more. I don't know, but it's a vast number. So those games are released, whether on Steam or somewhere else. They sell for a little while, and then the sales die. And I mean die as in hardly anything is sold. Because there are vastly more games coming out, and so people move on to something else. There are exceptions to this, and usually the exceptions are games with budgets of millions of dollars and advertising budgets of millions of dollars. I'm talking about ordinary games that people publish. Now, I saw that with my game, Doomstar, which the publisher called Lou Pulsfer's Doomstar. It sold a reasonable amount, I suppose you could say, to begin with, like average for a game, which is quite low, and then virtually nothing. Now, unfortunately, the same thing is starting to happen in tabletop games. And this is bamboozling even the big publishers like Steve Jackson's games and Fantasy Flight and so on. The game appears in shops, if it's fortunate enough to get distribution in shops, and it sells for maybe 45 days, and then it's done. Well, what if it sells well, Lou? That doesn't generally matter, because there are other new games, and there's very much a cult of the new in the tabletop game industry, and so people want to buy the new games. They don't want to buy the old games. There are very few exceptions to that nowadays, and games which once would have been regarded as evergreen, that is, selling regularly for a long time, don't do that anymore. They're in there 45 days, and they die. Now, you can still buy them online, for example, but it's the nature of the market that they come out there and die. And so we still have sending a game out to die. Now, this also refers to marketing. And marketing used to be a job of the publisher, but now publishers have to publish a lot more game titles in order to sell the same amount of games, because each title sells a lot less than it has in the past, because, among other things, it has a great deal more competition. So the publishers don't do much to market the games. The individual designers have to market the games. Well, that's a lot of work and a lot of time, and not everybody has those opportunities. You do that through things like Twitter and Instagram, perhaps. I don't use Instagram myself. And other social media outlets, Facebook perhaps, to try to get the word out to people that this game exists. Because generally speaking, people don't even know the game exists. That's what's called a discoverability problem. And if people don't know the game exists, then they can't buy it, can they? Now, Kickstarter avoids some of that, though you can send a Kickstarter out to die as well. But if you do, then probably it's not going to get published because you're not going to make your goal and you're not going to have the money to publish it. But even if you do, the Kickstarter sales happen, and then the shops don't want the game because the people who really wanted to buy it have already bought it through Kickstarter. So in a sense, it's even worse. You make your money on Kickstarter, and then you're dead. So it's not even 45 days. In a sense, it's one day after release, after you actually ship it to people, the sales dry up. Now, what can you do about that? Well, self-marketing is one thing. Getting lucky is very much another thing. But unfortunately, game publishing and game design is no longer a meritocracy, if it ever was. You don't succeed because yours is the best. You succeed for other reasons. And so sending a game out to die, unfortunately, is the norm. Sorry to tell you this, but that's the way it is. Thanks for listening.